Why are there so many people here?
Hello.
Hey guys. We having class in the dark today?
No, I don't.
There we go.
It's fine with me. It doesn't make a difference to me.
I don't know. Well, Sam is presenting today, so maybe it would be nice if we can see him.
I'm here.
Hey Alexandra.
Hi. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I passed by to
I'm gonna walk. Bring the goat. I'm not gonna look at the camera. I'm just gonna walk.
Do not look at the camera.
I have your coat, Adam. Come on. This is getting worse.
I know this room is used a lot, so.
Is it like a common room or like a lounge or something?
No, it's technically the college seminar room, and
Oh.
sometimes there are people just come in here when there's no class.
Okay. Hang
That's
out.
why- Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we kind of have to kick people out every time.
It's okay.
It's okay though.
Yeah. Power.
Wait, are you somewhere different today?
I am. I'm in Albuquerque. I'm at my parents' house.
Interesting.
Oh, isn't that where High School Musical took place?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can
that's
see what?
Cool. Oh, I was just saying that's where High School Musical took place in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You can see
Yeah.
You can see a big map of New Mexico.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to say, I just see that as like a big rectangle, but now that I look at it, yeah, it does look like New Mexico because at the bottom.
Yeah. My dad really likes maps. And so there you can see one of Washington State.
Oh, yeah. And a globe behind you, yeah.
Yeah, there's a globe right there.
I'm
Yeah.
going to try to turn on some of the lights.
Okay.
Your dad should get like some of those like older maps, like how there's like these older maps of like how the world used to look back then, or like how.
Oh, yeah.
Does he have those? Because I know my dad does, and they're very cool.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. I don't know if he doesn't have any big ones, but he has an atlas with old like world maps in it. That's pretty cool.
Sorry. Yeah, I have this old map of Pittsburgh. Before, when it was, I don't know if it used to be two different cities, Allegheny and Pittsburgh.
Oh.
And my house it was just a big farmland, and it's pretty cool to look at.
Yeah, it's cool to look at those old. I know that when we lived in Philadelphia, we would go and like to museums, historical museums, and they'd show old maps when Philadelphia was just a few blocks, around the Delaware River.
Yeah.
And like where we lived, even though we lived pretty much downtown, that was like farm country, back then. So yeah, it's one of the cool things about the East. The cities tend to be much older and have much more interesting history.
My cousins live out in Phoenix, so I go out there occasionally, and I can't take it. It's just too planned.
I know. Yeah. And it's huge, and it takes forever to drive anywhere.
Yeah. And then also, like, instead of, like, in Pittsburgh, it's very hilly, and we build on everything there. It's like you just build around the mountain.
Uh-huh.
And
Lay back.
Yeah, I don't like this chair.
New Mexico's so
Too laid back.
flat.
Mexico's flat?
New Mexico.
Oh.
I
hate
no.
I'm so used to like Pennsylvania with all the hills, so like anywhere else that doesn't have as many hills, it like throws me off for like a couple of weeks until I get used to the place.
You feel really geographically vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like it's weird. It's like not cozy.
I feel really weird, yeah.
It's also like the distance is weird because here, like, if you have to go through a tunnel or cross a river that's really far away.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I don't know. Obviously Zach is not here, and I haven't heard anything that was going to suggest he wouldn't be here, but I
Maybe
guess we
waiting for his
can.
room? What happened to
Yeah,
our
it
other
could be.
friend?
That could be.
He dropped it?
Oh yeah, no, he had to. Yeah, he had to drop.
And then there were 4.
And then there were 4.
And now there's 3. Well, I guess.
And now there's 3. So, oh wait a minute, I just got an email. Let me see if that might be Zach.
I was interested to see what Zach
No.
would have to say about this paper.
Yeah. Right, especially given some of what he was saying in response to the previous paper. Well, so actually, why don't we start off then? Jacob, we kind of hijacked your presentation late in the game there on Monday. So if there's anything that you wanted to say or any points you wanted to make that we didn't get to, you can have a couple minutes now if you want.
I'm a little bit caught off guard, to be honest.
Yeah. No worries.
No, I think we covered most of it. I mean, at the end, trying to get at what Dennett was trying to say through and like kind of like figure out what's the argument he's making.
Right.
I came to the conclusion, because he's not very explicit, that
right.
He's talking about the immateriality of the mind and the soul and how it can be applied to then personal identity, and how personal identity is not necessarily connected with the body or the brain. Specifically, it's not as much of a physical thing, which I think now then kind of rolls over into this next paper a little bit. A lot of the concepts are very similar about getting a new body, or I want to go into your thing, Sam, but is the example of what was the one like where they send the old bodies to the moon and then they get new bodies? I was like, oh, same sort of general example. And same principle applied. So I think we just kind of move on. We'll kind of cover a lot of the same things.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The only thing I will tell you, though, is that Dennett does not think that the mind is immaterial. Nevertheless, you're in a way, you're right that he doesn't think that personal identity is grounded in the body or even the brain. Dennett has a kind of a fairly distinctive view about the self and personhood, according to which we are sort of selves are fictional, that human beings create stories about themselves, and you are the main character in the story. So yourself is the fictional character that the human being that you are is telling about itself. So it's not that there's an immaterial object that is the self, but there's a way in which the self is not a real thing, according to Dennett. The way like the chair or your body is a real thing. So kind of interesting. Yeah. So, but he wasn't trying to argue for that in the paper. The point of the paper was actually subversive. The point of the paper was just to try to show you how your ideas about the self are like silly putty. You can stretch them and contort them all over the place, and that they lack a kind of a kind of unity and cohesion.
Yeah. I think I was trying to go a little bit farther than trying to like make sense of ways. Yeah. No,
cool. Okay,
yeah,
but yeah.
I totally understand you.
But yeah, you're absolutely right that the themes carry right on over into this next paper. So Zach, glad you're here. And so why don't we get going? I have a kind of important announcement because I've changed my mind a little bit about the final exam. You're still going to have one. First of all, this third writing assignment, just to remind you, this is optional. And the idea is that you can rewrite one of your two essays for the semester for a shot at a better score. And what I'm looking for in the rewrite is a fairly substantial reworking of it. So I'd like to see responsiveness to my comments, improved clarity, a strengthening of your argument, if you can do that, a deeper investigation or explanation of key ideas. So this means that the paper is probably going to end up being a little longer, and just overall polish. So I'm going to make an official post about this on eCollege and create a Dropbox so you can upload your paper if you choose to do this. And I'll do that pretty soon. I decided it wasn't so crucial to do that today because basically this is the assignment. I don't have that much more to say about what the assignment is than this. And it's just due anytime before the start of the new year. That'll give me time to grade it. Grades are due January 5th, by the way. So if you're wondering when you're going to get your final grade for the class, that's about when it will be, January 5th. Yeah, and if you do this, just upload it to eCollege using the Dropbox basket, or you can just email it to me as an attachment. So, although one thing I want to say, because Jacob, you've been emailing me your stuff.
Yeah, it hasn't been working.
Yeah, you've been including the paper in the kind of as in the body of the email. So I actually like it better if you also save it as like a document of some sort and attach that document. That way.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a big deal. Yeah, not a big deal. But okay. So pretty clear on the third writing assignment. We've got duplicate Zach's again. There we go. Yeah, Jacob.
I think this question's already been asked, but when are we going to be receiving our papers?
Right, the one that you just turned in?
Yeah, so we can plan a little bit ahead if we want.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to try to get those back to you by Monday.
Okay.
So, okay, speaking of Monday, that's an optional day. We're going to have, I'll be here at the ordinary time, ordinary place, to hold a kind of a review session if you want to talk about what might be on the final exam. But I've changed my mind about the actual final exam format a little bit. It's not going to be a 3-hour thing anymore. I realized that I was thinking about the last time that I gave this exam, and at that time it was proctored, and so it kind of made sense to confine it to 3 hours. And I was going to give you the possible essay questions ahead of time, and then you'd have to actually write the essay during the 3 hours. But since this isn't going to be proctored, I've decided that isn't really, it's not that important to me that we do it that way. So this is just going to be a take-home exam. And I'm not going to give you the questions ahead of time, but you're going to have all of next week to work on this. So right after Monday's review session, or shortly after it, I will make the exam available on eCollege. And you can download it whenever you want. And you have the whole week to work on it. It needs to be completed and submitted by 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Friday, December 19th. Okay? Everything else is the same. It's still open. I mean, obviously it's going to be open book, open note, So there you go. That's the new plan for the final exam. So yeah, Jacob.
So is it still expected to take about 3 hours, 4 hours? Is that still
right? So I suppose in principle you could finish it in that amount of time. Yeah, because I'm not going to make it a lot longer now. It's still going to be, but see, the way that I was planning it before, I would give you the possible essay questions ahead of time, and you'd be able to kind of sketch answers, and figure out what you wanted to say.
Yeah. So it's going to take longer.
Yeah, because you're going to have to figure out what you want to say now during next week, instead of figuring it out ahead of time, then going in and writing it during the 3-hour period. So there's no like page limit on this exam. You just write as much or as little as you need to answer each part of each question thoroughly and completely. But that said, yeah, I'm not making it longer than it used to be. So in principle, you probably could finish it, in several hours. But, beforehand, you would have been thinking already about what you were going to say in response to the essay prompt. So it probably will take you a bit longer than that. So, okay? Are you guys good with this?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's so much better.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I don't even think I have 3 hours at one time to be doing it.
That's all. Yeah, that's true. I don't think I have 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, that's the kind of thing you guys should have said beforehand. I
I
would,
didn't even think about that. Yeah.
but okay, good. I'm glad that this will work out. Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'm not going to say much more today. I'm just going to remind you that we're talking about this question about the nature of the self, and the two big questions there are, what is the self, and what is it that makes something the same self over time? And just one more slide about change and survival. So one way to help think about the nature of the self, one sort of tool that you can use to think about what you think the self is to think about what sorts of changes could occur, whether to your body or to your mind or to your environment, or I don't know what else you might change. But what sorts of changes could you survive in principle? That is, what sorts of changes could you persist through or to continue to exist through? Because, look, if you can survive the change, then whatever it was that changed isn't essential to you, the self, the thing that is thinking and wondering about survival. So that's a kind of tool that you can use, that a lot of philosophers have used to investigate the nature of the self. I think we see this in the Dennett paper and the paper for today. And just one thing to keep in mind, though, a kind of important distinction that you should keep in mind when thinking about these issues is the distinction between qualitative similarity, right, sharing of properties, and numerical identity, or what's called strict identity. So this is the difference between having two things that are exactly alike, potentially, being perfectly qualitatively similar, versus having just one thing, right? This is, we recognize qualitative similarity a lot. So you might say, you might see the coffee cup I'm drinking out of, and you might say, oh, hey, Dr. Walhagen, I have the same coffee cup. You don't mean that this is your coffee cup. You mean you have another one that's just like this one. It has all the same properties, right? Versus being one and the same coffee cup, in which case you're claiming that I stole your coffee cup if you say, I have the same coffee cup. So keep those concepts in mind as you think about these issues, and it will help you to avoid certain, I think, confusions. Yeah, okay, I think that's it. I think that's all I want to say. I'm going to turn it over to Sam. He's got some pretty cool looking images for us in his presentation. Are you ready to go, Sam?
Yeah. How are we gonna do it again with the PowerPoint?
I'm going to share it right now using what is this called? Adobe Connect.
Yeah.
So it should appear here in a second. One thing I want to say, a little claim to fame here. When I worked at the University of Pennsylvania for a semester, Susan was on leave, and I was the occupant of her office. So I have sat and I've taught and had office hours from her office with all her books on the shelf, and I felt like a little bit of an intruder because I didn't change her office any. But anyway, okay, Sam, why don't you take it away?
All right. First of all, the art that I put in here, I'm aware that it's very cheesy. I think it's really funny. Tech art is really goofy. Okay, but anyway. Okay, so Mind Scan, Transcending and Enhancing the Human Brain by Susan Schneider. So this paper really tackles the idea of transhumanism, but more so how transhumanism puts the self in jeopardy. And she explores sort of body enhancements and sort of what body enhancements would maybe jeopardize the self and what would not. Okay, so first of all, she sort of defines transhumanism and gives the Transhumanism Manifesto, which is transhumanism is a philosophical, cultural, and political movement that holds that the human species is now in a comparatively early phase, and its very evolution will be altered by developing technologies. So sort of the trajectory of human evolution is at its early stage, and so we're now in a sort of a very simple place, but as we develop stronger technologies, the end is immortality and sort of super intelligence, like this, like almost total perception, like the highest level of thinking that can be gained. So that's where we're headed right now. That's where the transhumanists are headed currently. Yeah. So then she sort of defines like what is the nature of a person. Nature of a person. In order to understand whether you should enhance, you have to understand what you are, and what you are necessarily enhancing. So there are several ideas about what the self is that she puts forth, and they are, sorry, I feel like I feel like I did this out of order, because she writes the paper in sort of an out of order way that doesn't really go with the ideas. Is there a chance you could just go to slide 6? Or actually, you know what? Never mind. Just go to slide 5. Just go to slide 5. It doesn't matter. I'll work around it. Okay. So,
What?
It looks like it's sort of over. Well, it doesn't matter. But anyway, she
There you
Oh yeah, are there any questions so far? Are there any questions so far? Anyone? Yes.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Is the concern about the image, that the image is covering part of the...
Yeah.
We fixed it. It's all good.
It's fine.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. Yeah, and, Sam, approach this any way you want. You don't have to, like, if you want to come back to this slide, if that'd help you, then absolutely do that.
Okay, no, I'll just do this. Okay. So the first example that she gives about sort of how a modification would change something is she looks at the essential properties of something. So there are non-essential properties that things have that don't necessarily define it as what it is. For humans, a non-essential property would be, like, say your hair. Like, humans don't necessarily need hair, or like your extremities. You don't necessarily need your extremities to be human. When we think of humans, we think of sort of born from another human, has a consciousness, and speaks language, basically, or those sort of things. Has an identity, or thinks they have an identity. So she gives an example of an espresso machine. So an espresso machine is in a coffee shop, and so an espresso machine is on at one point, and then the barista turns it off. 5 minutes pass, and then you ask, is that the same espresso machine that it was 5 minutes ago? And that's actually, and some people would say no, it's not. Like, that you can never step in a river twice, never step in the same river twice. That at each instant something is completely different than it was an instant before. But for our sake, we're going to say that it is the same as it was 5 minutes ago. But if you were to change the properties of a espresso machine, maybe add an extra thing to it, or hold on, that's a completely different thing. So this is like a persistence, the idea of persistence, that something maintains its identity through time. However, if the espresso machine were to melt, like completely, like sort of melt, you would say that something has changed significantly to the essential properties of that thing. So it would not be the espresso machine that it was 5 minutes ago. You can go to the next slide. So the self is basically identified by essential properties in this case. But there are some other theories about what makes a human, or not a human, but a self. So there's the soul theory that it's not very widely held. Like, it's not very popular within philosophy because it's pretty mystical. So your essence is your soul or mind understood as a non-physical entity distinct from your body, which, if I don't talk about this later, this actually sort of it can be applied to transhumanism in an interesting way. But to the psychological continuity theory, you're essentially your memories and your ability to reflect on yourself. And it's like your physiological configuration. And this is a widely held belief, that this is yourself is sort of like this combination of your memories, your past experiences, and sort of that you're this accumulation of all these experiences that you've had through your life. Which is, and this is pretty interesting, and this is widely held as this is like a pretty popular belief. And this is sort of what the transhumanists believe. This is sort of along the lines of what they view the self as, but they sort of applied it in a different way to their transhumanist ideology. But then there's materialism. You're essentially the material that you're made out of, so you're the sum of the whole. You're made out of atoms. You are atoms, and they make up your brain. That's who you are, and nothing more, nothing less. And then there's the no self, and I sort of like this idea. I don't know if I agree with it, but I think it's a very interesting sort of thing because it's very counterintuitive to how we experience things. So no self, the self is an illusion. There are bundles of impressions, but no underlying self. There is no survival because there is no person. In a way that it's like we think we're a self, but we are no different than any other thing in the universe. It's just like we are all made out of stuff, and this stuff amounts to nothing. Sort of idea. I don't know. I like that. I think it's cool, but I don't know if I agree with it. Let me see what my next slide is. Oh yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, well, I don't know so much, more a comment. I think you could throw, given what I just said at the beginning, I think you could throw Dennett into the no-self view a little bit, especially this attribution to Nietzsche of the view that the I is a grammatical fiction. Dennett's view is kind of like that. And I just thought I would point out that in the journal entries, I saw a pretty clear commitment from Zach to the psychological continuity theory. I don't know if he identifies with that. Does that seem right? Yeah. And then Jacob, you came across as a pretty clear materialist, I think. I don't know if you feel like that's a correct attribution.
Maybe a little bit.
Is it Noam Chomsky, who I know he's a big proponent of psychic continuity, but you know who I didn't look this up, but who invented sort of the idea of psychic continuity?
Okay, so the most famous statement of the psychological continuity view is John Locke in the 1600s. So like 16.
Oh, long time ago.
Yeah. So it's been around for a long time, and it is true that it's probably the most popular theory amongst philosophers, despite the fact that there are some, I think, very interesting objections to it. But
yeah, I feel pretty I feel objected. I object to that pretty much, I'd say. All right, let me just figure out where I am real quick.
Where? It's a good question. Where are we?
Where am I? Where am I? Sorry. 1 second. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So my next slide, I just sort of elaborate on psychic continuity a little bit more. So basically, you are necessarily, this is a quote, you exist through time because you are necessarily that future being who in some sense inherits his mental features from you, the one who has mental features he has then, in large part because you have mental features you have now. And you are the past being whose mental features you have inherited. You are memories and thoughts as they are passed from prior brain matter to new brain matter. So sort of like a baton race. Like your brains are just handing off these sort of ideas and sort of electrical impulses onto new brain matter. They're like imprinting themselves on a new thing. And those, you're not necessarily, your self doesn't exist in that tissue, but sort of in the imprint on that tissue. That makes, if that makes sense. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? All right. You have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't understand the wording for the, just like the wording when they talk about, you inherit a large part because you have mental features that you have now, and you are that past being whose mental features you have inherited. I don't get how the time is working here. Like.
So sort of like you existed in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and that past self gave your present self certain features, and your self now is giving features to your future self.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. I feel like I'm missing something. Okay. So so this is if you believe that your mind persists over time, then you sort of submit yourself to believing in a computational mind theory, that your brain your brain is, and your identity is very much a physical property. Like you don't believe in like a non-physical self at this point. If you believe that your self is transferred from one part of matter to another. And this is sort of along the lines of, like it plays into materialism, but it's like materialism with an extra step, almost. That like, it's very physical, but it's a little bit extra. But transhumanists reject materialism, and they sort of believe in this idea of patternism, that your personal identity is ingrained in a pattern, or your personal identity is a pattern. So, yeah, we know that our bodies are, we are not the same tissue we were when we were children. However, we still feel like we are the same person. We have the same identity as we did a year ago. However, every single part of our body is basically a new part. However, if we were to think about sort of a well, here just go on to the next slide. So then, this brings the problem of brain uploading. So if we believe that we are we're not the same matter that we were a year ago, but if we propose this idea that maybe we upload the pattern of our brain into a computer, and it's no discernible differences other than it's a computer program and we are sort of organic, and then you implant that brain into a artificial body with no discernible differences from you, like no physical or mental. Like someone could talk to you, you give the exact same answer. You would feel as if that was not the same person, because it's this whole other new identity, or new. It doesn't feel like it's you. But ourselves, we are actually made of different properties than we were, or made of different parts of matter than we were a year ago. So what's the difference between those sort of things? Yeah. Okay. Let me think about this real quick. Sorry. Uploading. Yeah, backup copies. Yeah.
Sam, while you're doing that, could I just make a comment?
Yeah, go for it.
So we let's just be clear what's happened here. We went through. So Sam presented the four main kind of theories of the self and personal identity, and then the transhumanists look like they're committed to a certain version of the psychological continuity theory, which they like to call patternism, right? And so the idea is, and it's good that Susan Schneider brings in thinking about the computer model of the mind, and we're going to talk about this next semester a bit. But I liked your Sam. I liked your idea of thinking about, on this view, human beings really are kind of organic computers, and the thing that's distinctive, the thing that makes a computer the kind of computer it is, right, is the program that it runs. The thing that's really distinctive about Mac computers is that they're running a certain operating system, whereas Windows machines run Windows, and it's a different operating system. And that's really where a lot of the differences between the computers is found. Well, likewise, you are a certain kind of program being run by this organic machine, but you can characterize a program abstractly as a kind of pattern. And so it seems to open up the possibility, and transhumanists like this, right? They sort of need it to be true, that if you are that pattern, well, you can get another device to run that same pattern. Okay, in which case, according to their view, if you did it the right way, that would be you. So you could upload your mind to another device, and that's part of the way that they, think we might be immortal or might achieve immortality. But there's an objection, and Sam, the way you've presented the uploading issue is that there's a kind of objection that comes with the possibility of uploading, and it's the one that you just mentioned about how, well, if you uploaded it to another thing and then that thing is off doing its own thing, that doesn't seem like you over there. And so that's an objection. So I just wanted to bring out the kind of dialectical process here. We got the different versions of the view of possible views. We got the transhumanist view, and then there's this objection that comes in from uploading, from the possibility of uploading.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this is, I was trying to think of sort of some analogies for sort of temporal difference of an object through time. So if we were to take a photo, like if you had a camera set up on a tripod, and you had a still life image of fruit, of some fruit, and you took an image at 12 a.m. in the morning of that fruit, and then you didn't move, nothing moved within that room, and then you took another photo 2 hours later. Would that still be the same photo? Like, are those photos exact? You know what I mean? Like, is that the same bowl of fruit that it was 2 hours ago, or have things changed?
Do you mean like has it started to rot and so it's changed?
Is it the same thing that it was 2 hours ago, or like just how? Yeah, but I should have mentioned that earlier. But okay. I don't know what.
Oh, I added the N on that slide.
What?
Oh,
Is a pattern a self?
Sorry. My bad.
But
yeah,
I added the N for you here on the slide that I'm sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, but so is this pattern a human being? And the transhumanists would like us to believe that it is, like a pattern is a self. But that really doesn't mesh with how I'd say that most people think about self, or how we think about a human being, in that a pattern, ourselves, if we had our pattern in a computer, we would not consider it ourselves. And this goes to the mind scan example that Susan Schneider gives us, which is, and this is like a very effective way of conveying this point. So basically, a guy who has a terminal illness, he goes to a mind scanning place, so they're going to scan his brain, and they're going to get the pattern from his brain and implant it into an AI or into an artificial body that is not burdened by the same health problems that he has. So he's in the scanner, they're scanning his brain, and then it's scanned, and the doctor says, "We're now implanting your pattern into a robot, basically." Yeah. And he has sort of like this existential crisis that comes on immediately. He's, but I am here. But my I am here, but my pattern, but my same pattern is in another body. That's not me. So this poses what do you?
But isn't the whole twist that at the end he is in the new body thinking that, right? That's the whole.
Well, there is.
If I read it right.
No, there is another. There is some sort of thing. There is a pattern in a computer program that thinks it is the original. What was his name? Sullivan. Yeah, who thinks he was the original Sullivan, but the true original Sullivan is still sitting in the mind scanner with a brain tumor. So this. Okay, so Sullivan. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So why? Why is that pattern not him? That's truly a that's the question. Does anybody have any ideas about why? Zach? Yeah.
Well, I actually believe that the pattern in the new body is still Sullivan. I thought you said that was his name, but it's still this guy because going back to what you said earlier about how if you were to meet a program or a robot with the same personality as you, you wouldn't think that it's you. I don't think that's so much because of the fact that it may not be you. I think that's more because our brains would be inherently separated from whatever other thing is created to be like us. And because we aren't merged with them mentally, we don't experience the existence through them, and we have a very singular point of view in how we survive. And anything that we can't perceive from its point of view, we don't think of as us. So we think that we think of ourselves, we think something is us if we see from its point of view. But I would say that the robot, it's still him. It's still this man that's been copied. It might not be the original one, if that is of import, but it still has his personality, his likes, his desires, his soul. And if it has a consciousness, then it is alike in every way as him, except it doesn't have the precise origin, but it thinks it has the precise origin, which makes up for that.
Well, I'd argue that it is something new. It's a new consciousness. That and the only way that it could somehow be the original Sullivan, so this is like a divergence in a self. So there's one line going straight, and then it sort of forks, in which that the Sullivan that was in the body scanner continues forward, and this new Sullivan star, Sullivan 2, goes off in a different direction, but they're completely adjunct from each other. They're truncated. And the only way that somehow that could be Sullivan is somehow there was another convergence. If somehow that the mind, they could mind scan the Sullivan 2 back into Sullivan A. And I like this. This isn't in the paper, but I think that would be the only way that Sullivan 2 would even have some semblance of still being Sullivan A, if somehow their consciousness could be merged together once again. It'd be almost like a dream. It's like suddenly remembering a dream that you had. Anybody have any
Yeah, well, I just want to piggyback off of that. I was like thinking, like right before you started talking about that, about this idea of like going back to like Dennett's paper and about having the two bodies, two same exact brains, same process of, yeah, the patterns are the exact same. So for that brief moment when it's just been scanned and has no experience, yeah, they're both the Sullivans. But as I start having experiences and other and other factors that change them, they're just two people that seem to have the same name, and that's about it. And then as Sam was saying, the only way to like bring them back would be to come back to a convergence and rescan to get the same person, because after you split and they do their own thing, they're going to develop differently, and they could be, as in Dennett's paper, the complete opposite.
Yeah, I don't think that if you believe in a self in sort of a psychic continuity, psychologically continual way, that you would have to admit that there is a self within Sullivan too. That a self exists. It's not necessarily the same self, but that is another being, an important being, because it does have all the same properties of Sullivan too. It reached the same conclusion in a different way. Just took a different path to get there, almost. Yeah, go.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I agree with your path diverging thing. They aren't the same people after they diverge the path, but I think they're both Sullivan. And I think a better way of thinking about this that might help make my view seem a little bit truer in light of that example is, imagine you have one Sullivan, and he's going down, and there's a path that diverges in two places, and imagine, let's pretend this is an indeterministic choosing of his path, and he decides to go one, or he could decide to go the other. If he takes one or the other, he's still considered Sullivan. Whether or not he takes the rightward path, he is Sullivan, and if he takes the leftward path, he might be a slightly different Sullivan, but he would still be considered Sullivan. Now, if you have the original Sullivan and then the copy, and either one takes a different path, they're still Sullivan. They might be slightly different, but they would still be considered that same person from earlier.
I don't know if I agree with that. Because
Go first.
What? I don't know if this example would work. This is just off the top of my head. So basically, twins are born, identical twins. They're born separated immediately at birth, and this is completely impossible. But hypothetically, given the exact same experiences throughout their life, raised exactly the same, have the exact same identical imprint of a mind. Are they the same person? Don't they have two different identities, as we would call them? Like, aren't they? And if one were to die, but before they were dead, they uploaded their mind, and then they downloaded that mind into the mind of the twin. Wouldn't that be the other one?
Wait, what?
Well, that got confused. So, Sam, this is a great example. And so, yeah, I think Zach definitely needs to have a response to this. Although I would have stopped it right at the uploading part.
Yeah, what was all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but are they the same person? They have the same pattern, have the exactly the same, but wouldn't you consider them to be different people?
Well, we have to define our terms. I think they are different physical bodies, and I think that there are different consciousnesses, because they might be perceiving identical worlds, but they aren't perceiving the same world. But I think they have the same identities.
No, like, sure, an identity in the way that we call, like, like an identity, like me and Jacob say our only attributes are like well, I don't know, but like our cultural identity, sure, like same cultural identity, same we like the same food, we like the same
In Winchester.
we like the same, but at the root of like what an identity is, and like a single body that has its own experience, like those two things have their own experience. It's not shared. Just because they have the same doesn't mean that it's a shared experience. They have their own
way of perceiving it.
It's their own perception, even if it's even if it's the same.
Well, I have a counter theory to that. What if you have two alternate universes that are identical, and you have one person going down one world, and then you get the exact same version of the other person and bring them into your universes? Would they be the same person? Would you consider them the same person, just from different alternate universes?
I would.
I don't. What do you mean by alternate universe? Because I don't know what necessarily mean by alternate universe.
Like if you look at a science fiction movie where someone can go into a different dimension and they meet the exact version of themselves, normally the versions in science fiction movies are slightly different. They might come from a warrior galaxy, or they might come from a galaxy where everyone has 4 arms or something. But imagine you go to another universe where everything is identical. Would you consider these people to be the same?
No, because they have their own. If there's two of them, they're different. Just because if you have a tree, and you cut off a tree branch, and then you put that tree branch in the ground, and it grows a tree that is genetically identical to the tree that preceded it. It's not
even
the same
if you
tree.
name them the same thing.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah. So,
I
let's let
think you
Alexandra.
probably
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Alexandra hasn't been able to get in on this yet.
Yeah.
So
I was just saying that probably wouldn't be the same person. Like, even if they had the same experience and the same genetic material, like in that example, it says that he was different from the other because he was aware of things after they finished the scanning. I mean, I'm not entirely sure about that, but he seemed to have some sort of awareness that the other person did not have. So the person who was traveling and found his counter person probably had some sort of awareness of the other person that the other person might not necessarily have. And so that difference is like a difference in experience, and that could be like just one of the reasons why they're different.
Well, there is something to be said for a divergence within like once you're conscious of a double, there is some I know that this is like a science fiction plot that like once you become aware of like another self that you have, like something and they're not aware, that is when a divergent. I guess that wouldn't make sense. Nah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking science fiction
No.
movies.
I understand that once you become divergent with someone, you aren't the same person identically, but why is one of the diverged branches why does that get more of a claim to being the original person than the other?
Well, I don't think that's like.
good question.
Okay, can I just? I don't think that anyone would have more of a claim, but they both can't be the claim. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're both their own. It doesn't mean that the artificial intelligence, the scan, basically the duplicate, is any less of a conscious being than Sullivan. I'd say that they're equally, if we're looking at it in a patternist interpretation or like a sort of a psychic continuity way, that like Sullivan too is still it still has its own consciousness, but Sullivan 1, that's the real Sullivan. That's the original copy. Like, I don't know.
Can I modify the example a little bit so that we can kind of, because Zach's raised this interesting point about which one has the greater claim, and I want to change the example a little bit to really make that question difficult. So suppose now let's just call Sullivan 1 the Sullivan who goes in for the procedure, has the illness, goes in for the mind scan. We'll call that Sullivan 1. Okay. Now, instead of there just being one other body, so Sullivan 1 gets the scan, and that scan gets uploaded into not just one other body, but let's suppose that there were 2 of these androids built, right? And because, in case something goes wrong, you want to have that backup, right? Transhumanists like the idea of having a backup. So instead of just one, there are 2. And so this time, the scan gets uploaded into both of them. And as soon as the upload is finished, a gun goes off and blows away Sullivan. Now you have Sullivan 1, sorry. So now we have Sullivan 2 and Sullivan 3 are the new android Sullivans. And now they go off and start doing their own thing. Okay, so now there's no longer, it's clear that Sullivan 1 has ceased to be. At least in some sense. The gun went off, body stopped functioning, and so forth. And now you've got these 2 android uploads. Now the question, and now I think Zach's question is very difficult. Which one, if either, has a greater claim to be Sullivan 1? If either is Sullivan 1. Okay. Yeah, Jacob.
Okay, I'm going to have to go with neither.
Yeah, that's it.
Because one can't be any greater than the other. That's impossible. And because they're both going to be developing at their own separate thing, at their own separate ways, they're not like 2 robots doing the exact same movement, exact same everything. I think it would also be pointless to try to give them the claim to the prior Sullivan, because I think, it seems like we've all agreed that one identity can't be split over 2 different beings, I think, and so. Yeah,
I'm not sure that Zach has yet admitted that. I'm not sure he has.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he hasn't. Okay, but I thought, because it seems like every time we're saying only one can have it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, Zach, if you want to talk about that briefly.
Well, my problem is that identities change. So the idea that if you have 2 people that are identical, so they start off with the same identity, as time goes on, their identities might change and they won't be the same person anymore. But the fact that they originally had the same identities and their identities naturally changed at a normal rate, that makes me think that they're still the same person even if they don't have the exact same identities.
So, this is sort of an idea that I was playing with about how the difference between us changing over time and using a mind scan to sort of persist personal identity, in that it's like our brains are constantly rebuilding and breaking down, like our tissue to different parts. So if I were to go from the mind that I had when I was if I had the time where I had completely different tissue than I do today, if I were to supplement that brain into my brain, I would not say that I am the same person necessarily. But we're never at a instance where it is a complete transference of matter, in that there's sort of like a constant baton race within our brain to rebuild of imprinting onto other cells, and that it's sort of like this idea of becoming. You know, like that is a philosophical idea of becoming, sort of like this constant change process of giving and taking, and that it's like there's never one instance where I'm anything else but me. However, in the mind scan, it seems like there's a time where there's a non-existence that can't be real.
I would respond that it isn't non-existence, that the baton is being passed along both the original Sullivan and a baton is passed to the new Sullivan through the process of the mind scan. But actually, since we have to leave soon, I have another quick way I want to change it. So imagine Sullivan never got cancer and he's just walking around living his normal life, but then some really immoral aliens come along that have questions about philosophy, so they decide to pause time. Let's pretend they can pause time. Then they scan Sullivan's consciousness, they get everything about him, they destroy Sullivan, and then put an exact identical copy in his place that will relive his life just as he would have done that. Is that copy still Sullivan?
I don't want to say yes. At this point, honestly, we've discussed who where does the identity go? Well, maybe the identity kind of just dies off and it's a whole new identity then.
No, I actually don't want to dismiss that question. Actually, I feel like there's a temporalness to that question that's maybe not realistic. Because maybe in an instant, I guess, how do you define an instant? And that's actually I don't want to dismiss that question.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that just pausing his time doesn't necessarily pause time. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Just because you're pausing.
Well, you just imagine that the aliens are super fast. They can move at the speed of light, so it's as if time pauses or something like that. That's one way you could deal with that. Although, unfortunately, darn, we never have enough time here. Speaking of time, because we're gonna have to wrap things up, unfortunately. But I will say, the Winchester Thurston view, I think, has got to go with Jacob here and say that that's a duplicate. Just like it's a cool example. It's an example where it's harder to know that there's a duplicate, but that's a duplicate, and so it's a different person. Even though it has, one thing, Zach, I think in a way we are victim to not defining our terms very precisely here, because there's a sense in which you can speak of one's identity and you can talk about another person having my same identity. But remember the distinction between numerical identity and perfect similarity. You could speak of two different people having the same, that is qualitatively perfectly similar identity, that is personal characteristics and so forth. And nevertheless, they're numerically distinct people. One could be shot without the other being shot, so they've got to be different. So anyway, but you know what? Next semester, we're going to pick up kind of where we've left off here with the philosophy of mind, and we'll be thinking about what the nature of the self is. We'll talk about this dualistic view a bit. It turns out that there's been a kind of revival of a sort of dualism of late. So, and maybe we can come back to some of these cool thought experiments and try to figure out what we want to say about them. So good. I hope that was fun. I think that was a nice way to conclude the semester. And I wish you guys all a great winter break.
The semester's
over.
Oh.
Semester's over. Yeah, Monday is just a review session. So.
Is there final exam included in the final semester grade?
Yes.
When do we have to take the final exam?
Next week. You have to have it done by next Friday. See you, Zach.